Today's guest is Irene Schonberg, who I recently had the privilege of completing a course called Interpreting Diagnostic Data for Practitioners. Now, the last year I have been using the Oligoscan, which I first was introduced with John Gamble when I had him on the show last year. And I've done about 150 scans just in the past year or so, and it has really completely revolutionized my practice. So I wanted to get Irene on the show today to have a bit more of a chat about the Oligoscan and what sort of information we can gather from this. So the Oligoscan does need to be done in person, but for the interpretation of the results, you can contact Irene directly to have an online consultation. So to get in touch with Irene, visit www.eatrightforlife.com.au. And if you're a practitioner interested in doing her course, do check the show notes for the link or get in touch with Irene via the website. So eatrightforlife.com.au. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to the Homeopathy Hangout, where we discuss all things homeopathy from around the world. And now my mum and your host, Eugenie Kruger.
Hello, homies, and a very warm welcome to Homeopathy Hangout. Today, we get to hang out with Irene Schonberg. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
Lovely to have you. We've been hanging out quite a bit recently because I have recently completed your course on interpreting diagnostic data, which has been fabulous. And I have begged and pleaded to have you on the show so we can continue the conversation. And now Irene is not a homeopath, but I am starting this new section on the podcast that I'm going to call Wellness Wednesday, although there's only been like 1 or 2 episodes on Wellness Wednesday. So it's good that we're getting another one in there as well, which is for people who are not homeopaths, but who have got very valuable information that you can offer us that's going to help enhance our practice, and also for our clients that they can get some different ideas to get answers for their health concerns.
Yeah.
So do you maybe want to tell our listeners a little bit about your journey and how you've come to do the work that you do now?
Yeah, sure. So my journey is not a standard journey. I actually worked in the IT industry for nearly 20 years, actually. And being a nutritionist now is quite far removed from working in the IT industry. But working in IT, I was very much under the pump all the time, a lot of stress, a lot of pressure. I was co-director. In the end, I was a co-director of a small IT business, but I worked in big businesses like Bridgestone, John Martin's, which is a department chain, part of David Jones. So massive amounts of stress and pressure. And I just got to a point where I just couldn't handle it anymore. I was quite obese, quite overweight, slept poorly, drank a lot of alcohol, smoked. So all the bad things that we tell our clients not to do, I did them all. So I came from that kind of background and left the IT industry and sort of bummed around for a little while, and then wanted to get to the truth about nutrition and about what is the right message, what is the right information on how to lose weight and how to be healthy. And I started researching, and there was so much conflicting information. It was just doing my head in. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to go and do a bachelor degree of health science. And I just thought, I'll just do it for fun. And I applied for the course, and in that week that I was due to start, my husband was diagnosed with brain cancer or glioblastoma. He had brain cancer 2 years before, had surgery and recovered really well from it. And I guess we were maybe a little bit complacent and thought that everything would be fine and everything was all great and we valued life a lot. And then all of a sudden it came back. And I thought to myself, I can't start a university to sort of be there for him. So I thought, I'll just go in for fun right now. I need to sort of be there for him. So I thought, I'll just go in for fun, because I've never been a book smart kind of person. I'm very much a hands-on kind of person. So I go into the university, I go into Endeavour College of Natural Health. I walk into the first lecture and I sat down and something came over me and said, this is where you're meant to be. And it was so profound that I couldn't argue with it. And so I continued, and I did do my degree even in that year, and he passed away 9 months later. But during that time, I was talking to lecturers and I was, grabbing all this information and researching more and taking him to different practitioners like homeopaths and Chinese medicine, functional doctors, you name it. I was dragging the poor man from one place to another, trying to save his life. So that's what took me into nutrition. I didn't have a real goal to begin with, but after going through everything with my husband, toxicity became a really big thing that I started to look into, because he was 38 years old when he passed away. He was so healthy. By that stage, I'd cleaned up my diet, I'd lost a lot of weight, and we were living a pretty clean and healthy lifestyle. It just didn't make sense. He did yoga, he did meditation. It just didn't make sense that he would die. And I just kept digging and digging to try to find more data and started looking at things like toxicity and heavy metals, and could that have been part of what may have occurred? Yeah. So.
And how did you find Oligoscan, which is what we're going to be talking about? And where did you how did that come across your path?
It literally just someone was talking about it. I was at a conference. I was at a nutrition conference, and someone was talking about it. And I said, "Oh, that sounds interesting. Do more. I want to see, because we had done hair and mineral, and the results of that were just kind of like nothing much." And I think with any diagnostic data, really, it's about the interpretation of the data. And I think with the hair and mineral, the interpretation wasn't really very good that we were given. And even with the Oligoscan, when she did my Oligoscan, she's kind of, "Oh, I think it might be a zinc blockade." I'm like, "Okay, what's a zinc blockade? Because zinc is up high, and what does that mean?" And she's, "Oh, I'm not really sure. I'll get back to you on that." And I thought, okay, this is a bit strange. And so I never really took it that seriously. But then years on later, I thought, when Mark's cancer was back, I thought, heavy metals. Oh, let's see if I can find someone, because I was interstate when I met this woman. See if I can find someone in Adelaide who does a Oligoscan. And she lovely came to the house and actually did the scan.
Oh, wow.
So that I didn't have to drag him to yet another place. And she actually ended up being one of my lecturers at uni, which was just so crazy. So, yeah, but even then she said, "Yeah, unfortunately, no, it's not heavy metals." And everything is fine. I look back over that data now and I go, "Oh, I see the signs. I see the signs." And it's what made me realize that maybe there's a lot of practitioners who really aren't interpreting the data as closely or as well as they could be. And that's what sort of led me to doing my course.
Amazing. I'm going to backtrack one little step for our listeners, just to tell them a little bit about what Oligoscan is. And actually,
sure.
You'll have to check on our Rumble channel, because YouTube's deleted my channel. Can you believe it? More than 300 videos and thousands of dollars of paying my VAs to upload those videos. YouTube just deleted my channel for apparent medical misinformation. So AKA speaking the truth. Yeah, I wish. So just go, if you want to watch the audio of this, you'll have to go onto my Rumble channel. Make sure you subscribe while you're at it. But in my hand here, I'm holding a little photo spectrometer, or infrared spectrometry, it's also called. So what we do is we just put this onto 4 little spots on your hand. I have done an episode on the podcast before with John Gamble, who is the license holder of the software here in Australia. And he kind of started explaining about it. We're going to go a little bit more into detail today about what it is and what it does and what we can interpret on it. So it goes by a few different names. The kind of trade name for the software that we use is called Oligoscan. But then there's also other terminology that's used. Do you want to just clarify that for our listeners? So we're just painting them a picture of what it is that we're talking about and what this test looks at.
Yeah, absolutely. The difference between hair and mineral is you're actually taking a sample of hair from the back of the neck and you're sending that off to a laboratory. And the hair is a form of excretion. So when the body is trying to excrete something, it comes out through the hair. What the Oligoscan does is it uses the infrared on the hand itself, and it is actually shining through the skin into the cells. So we're looking at the cellular tissue, which is different to, say, the bloodstream, for example. So within the cell is where the mitochondria, where all the good work happens. When you look at blood work, it's the bloodstream or the venous blood. So nutrients are being carried around the body. So things like heavy metals won't show up in the bloodstream because the body is not going to leave that running around the bloodstream, because that is going to damage all its organs on its way through. So the body will take those toxins and put it into a cell or send it through the liver for excretion. So it'll excrete through the stools and through urine, through sweat and through hair. Sometimes if the body is struggling to excrete, it'll store it in fat cells. So any kind of toxin of any kind, not just heavy metals, but any kind of toxin, if the body can't excrete it, it'll just put it in a fat cell, because the fat cell sort of takes it out of the bloodstream, takes it away from the vital organs. Yeah, and so what we're looking at is cellular information. So what's in the cell and around the cell, as opposed to what's in the bloodstream.
Amazing. And I just want to say something else there as well. I am personally not a big fan of hair mineral analysis, because when you're getting that hair from the back of the head, it takes a couple of months for that hair to grow out. So the stuff that's being pushed out of the body that picture that it's giving you is a couple of months old. Then you have to send it away to the lab, and it takes a couple of weeks to get the results. So by the time you get the results, it's actually telling you what happened in the body 3 or 4 months ago. And
100%.
only if you're a good excreter. If you're not a good excreter, it's going to look like, oh, I'm really healthy because my mercury is really low. But actually, if you have, especially MTHFR gene mutation, your body's not going to be able to push that out. So yes, it will show low because your body can't get rid of it. And that's really not giving you the information that you need.
No.
With blood tests, they are great, but it just really tells you what's coming and going. I like how John talks about the airport transfer lounge. Like people are like coming and going, and that's you can get a lot of information from that. I recently had a client whose mercury was off the charts on the Oligoscan. And then she went to her doctor, got a blood test, came back triumphantly going, I've got no mercury. And I said to her, yes, because you're dead right now if you had mercury circulating around in your blood. So you can both, I think blood tests and Oligoscan each have their place, and it's great if you can use the two together.
Yes.
But and I guess the other downside with Oligoscan is just that you need to do it in person. And there are practitioners all around the world that do Oligoscan. What I do if a client of mine that's in another part of the country needs an Oligoscan, I'll email John and his wife Naima, and I'll ask who's the local practitioner. They'll send me the details. I'll forward it to that person. Then they physically have to go to that person and have their hand scanned. So that is the only downside of the Oligoscan is you do need to physically go to a practitioner to go and have it done. But the information that you get from it is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And I guess the only other downside is knowing your blood type. And a lot of people don't know their blood types. They make the assumptions that it's on their blood test results, which it's not. They make the assumption that their doctors know, but they don't. So so having some sort of a blood test kit is good, but a lot of practitioners don't have them. But that could be the other's downfall. But even if you don't know that and you scan someone and they're a blood type A and you scan them as a blood type O, it just means the data is going to be 80% correct rather than 100%. And I feel that's still pretty good. And you can still get a trend. You can still sort of see what's going on. Obviously, we want to get the most accurate, but you're quite right. And the blood test, having that blood information as well. Sometimes some people can go, oh, Oligoscan, how can you tell all that information just by shining a light? But when you interpret the bloods, and I most of the time interpret the bloods first before I even meet the person, before I even know what their health complaint is, I will go through their blood work line by line, looking at things that are outside of that really wide range that the doctors use, but actually an optimal health range. When you can see where all the little imbalances are, you start to draw a picture. And so I do a report on all of that. So before they've even come and seen me, I already know roughly what's going on. And then the Oligoscan fits in really nicely, and you can cross-reference the two.
Amazing. And I guess the other thing, as I'm just thinking, Irene, I guess somebody can go and have an Oligoscan done with whichever practitioner they want, and then also just come to you for the interpretation. Because there's actually a pharmacy here in Perth that I send a lot of people to, but they don't actually do the interpretation. They just do the scan. And the thing with the Oligoscan is you cannot take the data on face value.
No.
You will. Okay, so maybe what I might do is I'll quickly just show, just for the blood test for our listeners on Rumble. You can just get this off eBay, the Iodine blood typing test. This is what it looks like afterwards. So you get like a little blood spot on 4 little spots, and you get the results instantaneously. I've probably done about 30 of these tests in clinic for my clients who don't know their blood type. So that's a really nice, easy one to do. But what I might do is just share screen so that we can show our listeners on Rumble. Am I saying the word Rumble enough? Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay. So what we mean when we say you can't look at the Oligoscan just at face value. If you were to just look at this scan, you would think that this client has got way too much zinc in their system. So maybe, do you want to explain to our listeners what's happening on the scan?
Yeah, so the chances are, I haven't seen the rest of what you've got there, but the chances are that either cadmium or aluminium are high or have been high in the past, or even mercury is another one that'll do it.
Yeah, you're right. They're all high.
Just so your listeners know, the color line is your recent scan, and the grey line is what it was prior, like your scan prior to this one.
Yeah, so I should say this is actually a client who has got so these scans are 3 months apart. So if you rescan, you can overlay the one scan over the previous scan to see whether there's been improvements. So exactly what Irene was saying.
Exactly right. Yeah, so what you saw, there was high aluminium, high cadmium and mercury. So those three there will tend to block a lot of nutrients. So they can block things like zinc, selenium, iodine. They're the main ones. that they block. So what's happening there is the zinc is there, but it just can't get into the cell to do its job. So it's I call it, the zinc is there, but it's knocking on the door, but can't get in to do its work. Like, it wants to go in there and make stomach acid and make digestion and do lots of really good stuff, but it's not being allowed entry to the cell. And I guess the way that I look at how that could possibly be working, and this is how I explain it to my client, it's a little bit like when you use deodorant. Generally, just commercial deodorant has aluminium within it. And people say, why would they put aluminium in a deodorant? And the reason they do it is because it's really good at blocking a cell. So when you put it on the skin, what it's actually doing is it's blocking those sweat ducts. So it works famously well. You can put a deodorant or antiperspirant on your skin and that area will tend to not sweat. The problem with that is anything that you put on your skin goes into your body, goes into the bloodstream. And there inside the body, it's doing a similar kind of thing. It's blocking nutrients from getting into that cell. And so that's where you have that situation. So when it's out in the red like that or extremely high, it means it's there, but it's not getting in. And if you just flick back to the actual vitamin levels, you should see that the vitamin levels are probably low.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you see there, originally the grey line, they were even lower. So clearly you've been working on some things and in getting those things improving, but your folic acid is still quite low. But things are improving. So you can see originally when you first would have done that scan 3 months ago, this person's, he or she's nutrition levels would have been quite low, probably feeling quite fatigued, probably not detoxing very well through the liver, probably not sleeping very well. But you've made a vast improvement in just 3 months, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and this is one of the things, there's so much that we can tell from an Oligoscan. And one of the most powerful things that I love is that, for example, this B9, we can see the B9 is very low. But then also if you have the sulfur very low, which actually wasn't that low, but if you have the sulfur low and the B9 low, you know that this person has got major detoxification issues and potentially MTHFR gene mutation.
100%.
Yeah. And so I guess I just want to stop for a moment here and just say, for me as a homeopath, like, we always prescribe on the symptoms in front of us. And we talk a lot about the mental emotionals and about the maintaining causes and all the things about the person's life, their childhood, their dreams, all that sort of stuff. But sometimes there's such a strong thing that's holding the person back from healing. In this case, very low folic acid, which means that their body is not going to be able to detoxify the way it should. So I can give remedies as much as I want. And yes, the remedies stimulate the vital force to heal itself. But sometimes you're just not going to get the response that you need unless you know what's going on. So I feel like the past decade in my clinic, I've been flying blind. And now with the Oligoscan, I feel like I can see. And I've done over 150 scans now. And I feel like suddenly I'm like, I know exactly what's up with this client and I know what I need to treat.
Yeah.
So as homeopaths, I think this is like it's an essential tool for everyone. I've become, in just 1 year of using Oligoscan, like the biggest advocate for it. But I think as homeopaths especially need to learn about this.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And even not just homeopaths, but nutritionists and naturopaths as well, because like you say, you're flying blind. And when I first started my clinic, like, I felt really uncomfortable and really, like, I really didn't know anything. But grabbing this kind of data, I knew I could see straight away what was happening for the person. And you can see, like you say, like, they're not detoxing well. It drives your questioning. You can ask the client or the patient, how do you feel in the morning? First thing in the morning, I bet you feel really heavy and really sluggish, like sludge. And they say, yes, how did you know that? And I say, your nutrition, your B vitamins are so low that your body's going to struggle to actually really detoxify. So the sludge of the day, I call it the sludge of the day, hasn't been cleared. So you'll wake up feeling like sludge because it's still there, right? It hasn't gone through, hasn't been excreted through the urinal, through the stools, and it's sitting there. You wake up headachy and heavy and just feeling awful. So it can definitely drive your questioning, and it's not to disregard all of the other things and all the other things that we question when we talk to our patients, but it's data that we can use to drive our questioning.
Absolutely. And actually, this is such a good case that I've got up here because, for example, there's a few things, like I said, we can pretty much see if you have MTHFR gene mutation. We can pick up if you have like underlying candida infections. But this case that we've got up in front of us here, we can see has got like raging thyroid dysfunction because we can see here the classic of what we call a zinc blockade here, which is when the zinc is not being taken into the cells. cells, there's very low chromium. If you look at the grey, so this was her like 3 months ago, the very low iodine combined with extremely high antimony in this. I know you said say antinomy. It's like tomato in me. So very high antimony in this case, which is like the trifecta for, actually, I think there's 4 things, right? So quadrifecta, is that what we call it? For thyroid dysfunction. So I've had clients in here that have gone for blood tests with their doctor and come back and said, no, my thyroid is fine. But then we do an Oligoscan and we can tell 100% your thyroid is definitely not functioning properly. It's not fine. Antimony is a big one. Can you talk to us a little bit about antimony? Some places that people, like, where does antimony come from and why does it affect the endocrine system and particularly?
Yeah, so it's a big thing in society, in our Western world, in our Western culture, as everything is wrapped in plastic. So antimony is something that is used in making plastics, in particular BPA, plastics that contain BPA, but not necessarily only BPA, but it is used in that scenario. So when you think about people who are trying to lose weight, for example, and they're buying pre-made dinners that come in a little tray and they're frozen, and then you take it out the box and you put it in the microwave and you heat it up and then you lose lots of weight. In actual fact, it's actually counterproductive because that plastic, there's no laws around whether you can use BPA or not in these plastics in the foods. In fact, up until quite sure the exact year it was, but baby bottles, for example, most baby bottles actually had BPA in them. So it would have been antimony as well. And where the problem lies is when you heat that plastic up, i.e. in the microwave, and when the food gets hot and the plastic gets hot, it's leaching that BPA or the antimony into the food, and then you're eating that food. So you imagine all these mothers that didn't know that they were causing harm by heating up the baby bottles and then feeding the milk to the children. And in some countries, they ban BPA, and in particular for baby bottles, and also plastics in baby toys as well, like the mouthing of those toys. In Australia, they made it an optional thing if you took the BPA out or not. So in a lot of things, they might say, maybe a drink bottle, they might say BPA free. So some chosen, but there's no law to say that you must specify whether it has BPA in it or not. So, for example, if you bought some spring water, a plastic bottle, and you're drinking this beautiful, pristine spring water, but you don't know the history of where that bottle has been before you bought it. So when you bought it, it was nice and cold, you got it out of the fridge, but it might have been sitting in a warehouse for 6 months that's hot, and those bottles have heated up and those chemicals have leached into the water, and then you're drinking it when you drink it. So plastics, anything relating to plastics and where plastics are heated up is a big thing. And what that directly does, the antimony directly, like you showed on your scan, it directly influences chromium. And chromium is a nutrient that is needed for optimal glucose control. So often when you see people who are overweight or who have diabetes, they'll have really low chromium and often the high antimony that goes with it. So recently I discovered, because I have a really cool dentist and I talk to her a lot about what I do and about toxicity and stuff. And she said to me one day, she said, "Oh, you're not going to like me then." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Oh, you know those white fillings that you have?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "Oh, they've actually got BPA in them." I said, "What?" And she said, "Yeah." She said, anything where you have the blue light that sets it, those ones, that actually has BPA within that bonding material. And dental is funny because there's different views about dental, but what I have seen is that under normal circumstances, whether it's a mercury filling or whether it's the white composite filling is the ones that they're doing, if those fillings are not damaged, they should be fine. You shouldn't end up with sky-high antimony just because you have white fillings, except if it's broken, chipped, or damaged, or cracked. That's when it leaches out. And I actually had this happen to myself. I had a tooth in the front and it had a crack in it, but I didn't know. And I started to gain weight like crazy and have all these sugar cravings. Like, what is going on here? I'm not doing anything different. I went to the dentist and she told me about the antimony in the fillings and highlighted that one was cracked. And I said, "Oh, okay, please fix that immediately." But it took 3 months for that to all settle out. But generally, under normal circumstances, antimony should leave the body fairly quickly, within a 24 hours to 48 hours, unless you've got your liver's under strain or other things are going on.
And the other thing that I learned from your course as well is teeth grinding and parasites can be another. If you have those white fillings and then you have parasites and you're grinding your teeth at night, and that's another what we call a maintaining cause.
It is such a big problem. And again, having these really great conversations with my dentist, I said to her, so how many people grind their teeth? I seem to see a lot of people who grind their teeth. And she said, oh, so many. I couldn't even tell you, more than 50%. I said, really? And I said, what do you put that down to? She said, oh, nervous system. It's all nervous system. This tight jaw, this is all about highly strung people. And I said, yeah. I said, it could be. I said, or it could also be parasites. She said, parasites. And I said, yeah. I said, parasites is another really big problem that we have in our society. And we think that we live in a pristine, clean country. And where in actual fact, there are parasites everywhere in the soil, in the water, in our food. They've become resistant to chlorine. And yeah, it really is a much bigger problem. And there's not much of a light shone on that. But when you hear just how many people grind their teeth, and when you have two surfaces that are being rubbed together, whether it's the composite fillings or the mercury fillings, you have two surfaces, some of it's bound to come away and you get ingested. Yeah, so it's a big one.
Absolutely. Now, this is also the part where I really love homeopathy in conjunction with like naturopathic type principles and this type of scanning technology, because we have a homeopathic remedy created by John Gamble, which is called aluminium chelate, which is a homeopathic version of antimony in a 12C, 30C, 200C, and 1M that he's combined the potency. So it really should be called like antimony homocord. I like that he uses calls it a chelate because it tells us what it's doing in the body, but it's probably technically not the correct term to use. It should be used called antimony homocord. But I have been able to use that remedy to help get a lot of these heavy metals down. Previously, before the Oligoscan, what I would have done if I suspected that a client had heavy metals or I wasn't quite sure is I would give them like a poly heavy metals detox, which is a homeopathic remedy made from various types of heavy metals. And then we would go in ascending potencies over a course of a few weeks. But I don't think I quite realized with a lot of these heavy metals, they don't really like leaving the body. So it can take a long time. You really need to prepare your clients that for some of them are quicker than others, but some of them it's going to take a year or two, depending on the level of toxicity and your nutrient level. It's going to take a while to get it out. But that is where it's like where I would have previously done the poly heavy metals detox. Now I actually look at the scan and I take the client's case and I see what other presenting complaints, because you can treat everything on the scan, but actually at the end of the day, you need to look at the client in front of you and see what their main complaints are. And now I more specifically target the particular heavy metals that, like depending on what the client's goals are for their health journey, I'll target those metals and things that I think is going to make the biggest difference for them.
Yeah, absolutely. But also changing the behaviors as well. If
100%.
they are buying these foods or putting plastics in the microwave or drinking from plastic drink bottles and leaving them in the car, for example, changing those habits as well. And also looking at things like if they are grinding their teeth, having a look at the potential whether parasites are there and doing a bit of a parasite cleanse, because you could be pulling the heavy metals out and they could be putting it back in again just as quickly. So you could be doing this up, in out sort of situation. So, yeah.
100%. Something else that I like here is that this is a client that lives in Perth, and so we have so many sunshine hours here. You wouldn't think that you'd see somebody with low vitamin D, but if you actually look at the original scan 3 months ago, like that vitamin D is almost not even on the chart. Yeah. But then also find this is where you have to look at the scan and in the big part, you also look at the calcium, magnesium, the phosphorus, and the boron. And I think fluoride is the other antagonist, right?
Yes, definitely. Fluoride will antagonize vitamin D, but also iodine as well. So there's a link there between those two.
Interestingly, so her fluoride in this scan has actually gone up. Like this 3 months ago, the fluoride was actually lower, but the fluoride is actually higher this time.
So I always encourage people to use fluoride-free toothpaste and mouthwashes and things like that. It is in our water as well, which is another really difficult thing. So having the right filter that'll take the fluoride out, because your standard carbon filter won't. And just, sometimes it could just be the sign that the liver is struggling a little bit. Because fluoride is generally pretty easy. The body will get rid of it fairly easily. So there's just a bit of a build up there.
I think with being a homeopath, we don't traditionally get taught much about nutrition. I did taught a little bit about it because I started off training as a naturopath and then became a homeopath. So if you have a client that comes in and they tell you they're chronically low in vitamin D, you might not necessarily know why that could be, but I feel like the Oligoscan has taught me to brush up on on nutrition and things like that as well. So now when I've got done the scan and I can see her fluoride is really high, then I'll do more questioning around where do you get your water from? And a lot of people will say, oh, I have a whole house filter, but it doesn't do fluoride. Or they might, like, I have actually been surprised and shocked how many people weren't aware that you shouldn't drink the tap water. And I'm like, really? Are we still having this conversation? But it's just also because, like, when we're health practitioners, we're in our own little world and just we know all these things and we think everybody else knows it as well. Well, I do anyway. And so I'm still get surprised that a lot of people don't know how incredibly toxic fluoride is and that they're drinking it in their water. And so there's a great maintaining cause there, and you can show them on the scan, look, your fluoride is really high, your vitamin D is not even on the chart. You're not going to be able to raise your vitamin D unless we get your fluoride down. And once again, we can use a homeopathic remedy to help get that down. But also, what's that saying of toxicity creates deficiency, right? Just addressing all the nutritional deficiencies that we can see on the scan and the green part here, like often just addressing that will actually get the metals down itself.
Yeah, and bringing the body back into a really well-functioning machine that it is. When you think about the liver function, the kidney function, digestion is the other really big one, the gut health as well, really huge. So when those things are working as they should be, and if people are eating cleanly and not drinking tap water and doing all the right things, not putting plastics in the microwave, generally things, and I guess stress is another really big one as well, and really good quality sleep as well, then you almost, I want to say don't need to chelate, but things will start to shift on their own. And it's only really drag out heavy metals quickly if we have something like cancer or something like that. If we're really urgent, need to get it out. I tend to just work a lot on just bringing things back into the green, like you've done here, and just let the body do the rest. Might be a slower process, but it's more manageable for the client, I find, and they start to feel good fairly quickly. And everything starts to fall into balance. Really well.
And just this actually wasn't planned for me to pull up this chart for us to talk about, but it's actually turned out quite well. Hey, because Irene and I've spent a lot of time together over the past 6 weeks. Actually, it was a couple of months, because it was every second week that we did a class, and it was over 6 classes, which was great because it gives you time to integrate that information. There wasn't much preparing that went into today because we figured we'll just hang out and just tell people about Oligoscan and things that come up. So it's good that it worked out that I've got the scan up and we can refer that to. But as I'm just looking at this while you're talking, I'm thinking it's just that importance again of, one, looking at the client in front of you, but two, interpreting the scan as a whole. Because if you look at her vitamin D levels improved here, which then, because that is synergistically works with boron, you can see the boron has come down, and it also works synergistically with calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus, and they've all come down. So as the vitamin D has improved, everything else is balanced. And isn't it amazing how the body does that? Well, all of these things are working.
And you could see that you've got that imbalance there with that high boron. So boron was also blocked. So we had zinc that was high, but you can see the boron was actually really high as well. And what boron's doing is it's managing calcium. And so what can happen there is, again, the boron's there but can't get into the cell, so calcium starts to then build up. And that can become problematic because when you've got high calcium, people think, oh, that's great, strong bones. Actually, think about it a little bit more. When you have high calcium, say, in your water, what's that doing to your shower head? It's blocking that up, right? It's calcifying things. It's making it hard. And so that can happen inside as well. We have all these tiny little blood vessels in the kidney tubules or in the brain. And when you have all this high calcium in there, so a lot of people, especially from age 60, 70 upwards, that are all madly taking calcium as a supplement, thinking that they need this calcium to have strong bones and not get osteoporosis. If the answer was that simple, why is the levels of osteoporosis up through the roof, right? Pretty much it's almost a given now. Once you hit a certain age, you're probably going to get osteoporosis. There's nothing we can do about it. But the problem is they're also having high blood pressure as well and having all these other problems. Just having calcium is not the answer to correcting these sort of things. It's looking at, and that's why I love the Oligoscan so much, is because we can look at the boron, and if the boron is high and blocked, The calcium's probably going to be high as well. It's not being managed properly. And then you've got magnesium and the phosphorus and the vitamin D. And you can look at all of that as a whole picture and go, okay, we need to correct this if we're going to dental health as well. So the teeth and the jaws and the bones around that, it's all connected with that as well. So people say, I've had people say to me, oh, yeah, my child has got soft teeth. Like they get a lot of fillings. Oh, they don't eat sugar or anything like that. And they've got good dental hygiene, but they've got all these cavities. So it's not, we need to look at everything. We need to look at, is it phosphorus, vitamin D, all of these things together, and balance, obviously diet as well, making sure they're not drinking soft drink and then going to bed before brushing their teeth and things like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, what are some of the other things that you can pick up on an Oligoscan? What are some sort of warning signs or some sort of diseases or some sort of things that you can pick up? Like I know leaky gut is one of them. Like you can pick that up quite easily. But what sort of other things can you pick up on the Oligoscan just by looking at the data?
One of the other things that I've worked out myself, and that's just through doing lots and lots of scans, is I would often see low chromium, but antimony quite okay. Like not high. So it's like, okay, what has caused this low chromium? It must be just diet. Let's just clean up their diet. And sometimes it would correct, sometimes it wouldn't. Had me baffled for a long time. But then I started to work in a clinic that did colon hydrotherapy, so colonics. And so I learned so much about parasites and candida and gut health and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, I had my learnings from uni, but this just took it to a whole other level. This was stuff we just glossed over it. And so I started to dig deeper and research into things like candida. And what I was finding is in every single case, the low chromium, when antinomy was fine, was actually pointing to candida or yeast or mold, actually. Sometimes, not always candida, but most times are. So you can look at their tongue and you can see if a person's tongue's got a white coating on it and you go, aha, yes, okay, know what we're doing. But that's what we're taught to look for the white tongue. But not everyone's got a white tongue because it just depends on where the candida is or where the imbalance is. So sometimes they would have bloating, sometimes they would have things like thrush or itching around those areas, genital areas, or even around the anus, actually, because anywhere where you have a situation where you have skin folds, so under the armpits, moist areas that don't get a lot of airflow, yeast tends to thrive in those areas. And then I also discovered things like little patches of skin, just little patches of little round patch of dry skin that made no sense why it was dry just in this one little patch. And it was all related to this candida. And I kept seeing it all the time on the scans. So I said, okay, let's just try if every time we see chromium low like that, and they always had sugar cravings, crazy sugar cravings, or they would say things like, oh no, I don't eat sugar, but I do like bread, or I do like my sourdough, or I eat a lot of fermented foods, or I do a nice glass of wine. So all of these things are fermented. And of course, the cravings are coming from this yeast. So once you start to treat the candida, so I just use herbs like badako or horopito and treat that, the sugar cravings go away. But of course, originally when I first started, I would just treat with chromium. And because, chromium deficiency, we'll just clean up the diet and give chromium. But I had very little success with that. Maybe 1 out of 10 I would have success with. And it took me a long time to figure it out. But yeah, so that was a huge one. Yeah, game changer.
Amazing. Something else that I recently discovered is just the importance of zinc is so important, but that it's the most important mineral for creating our stomach acid. And there's so many people going around with reflux, which the medical model will tell you that it's excess stomach acid, but actually it's too low stomach acid, which then means the food is sitting in the stomach fermenting, and then it's that lactic acid which then pushes up into the esophagus and creating that burning feeling. And so sometimes with these clients, and especially if they're A blood type, which tends to have lower stomach acid anyway, then the zinc is very low. And so you increase their zinc, and then, lo and behold, the gut issues are gone. But I just, while I'm saying that, just want to mention as well, the thing that I've loved about the Oligoscan too is that you can keep a close eye on the person's supplementation. So you can like high dose them with supplements, but if you scan them every 4 to 6 months, you can quickly adjust your supplementation. So you're not creating any toxicity. So it might seem sometimes in excess of what we're prescribing. Like the first time I started prescribing 90 milligrams of zinc a day, I was like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. But then they come back in 4 months and you can see how beautifully the metals have come down and the zinc's obviously done its job, and you haven't overprescribed it, and you can see what the body has done with that. So I feel like safer, especially if, like I said, being a homeopath and not a trained clinical nutritionist or naturopath, that I can give higher doses of supplements, but because I'm keeping a close eye on what the body is doing with it, you're not creating any toxicity.
That's exactly correct. And like you say, you're keeping a close eye on things, and you will see things start to shift, and you'll see, like you had on your scan, you can see all those vitamin levels go up naturally. Doesn't necessarily mean that you're prescribing all of those vitamins.
Yeah.
It's more that they're digesting better. So the food that they're eating, they're getting the value out of the food, and the body is being able to pull those nutrients out, and those symptoms go away with like the reflux and the heavy stomach after eating. But it's also worth mentioning too that stress will create the same similar kind of environment. When someone's highly strung all the time and eating on the run and not actually taking that time to digest their food, it'll have a similar effect where their vitamin levels will go down, their acid levels go down. So their zinc might actually look really good. The clinician, you're asking these questions, you think, oh, they've got reflux. Okay, yeah, it's probably a zinc blockade or a zinc deficiency. And you would just guess it. But then when you have the scan result, you go, okay, their zinc is actually fine. It's not that. It's stress. Let's talk about stress. Let's talk about your day. So it does take the guesswork out. Not that we're guessing. Obviously, we're trained professionals. Sometimes your head goes in one direction. You go, yes, I know what's going on here. And then you do the scan. You go, okay, it's not that. It's this. And that's what I love about it too, that it catches you before you go down a path that perhaps you shouldn't have gone down.
100%. And even like the adrenal fatigue that you can pick up on the scan. So if somebody's phosphorus and magnesium is very low, that they are probably in a state of adrenal fatigue. Mm-hmm. So that's also really helpful. Are there any other things? We talked about the leaky gut, like if there's certain heavy metals that's high, that they probably have leaky gut. What's some other things that you can pick up from the scan?
They're probably the main things. The candida, the leaky gut, I look for the high cadmium and high mercury. Those two tend to be more leaky. They create a lot of inflammation around the gut. So that can then create the leaky gut. They're the main things that I'm looking for most of the time. Just looking at things like bone health, like we've already said, bone health, stress levels. Like if phosphorus is high, like most people's phosphorus is low, and that's generally due to low vitamin D. But sometimes I see phosphorus really high. So it could be a couple of things. It could be what we call a mineral explosion. So when you have a few minerals that are up on the high side, it's not necessarily a blockade. It's more nervous system related, like you said, like the adrenal, the highly strung. But also sometimes it can be, high phosphorus can be soft drink, drinking soft drink. And so when you're drinking soft drink, it's actually the body is trying to equalize that. So it's actually pulling phosphorus from the bone. And that's how you end up with weak bones and weak teeth and high phosphorus on the scan. Yeah, so that's the other thing. And obviously, like we said before, the teeth grinding, so the parasites, when you see Brie and antimony high, and you can ask the question, and silver as well, maybe even tin, you can ask those questions around whether they're grinding their teeth and maybe start treating parasites and start questioning around parasites and things like that. Yeah. I guess the one thing that we can't really see overly is hormones. We can see the antinomy, obviously, and the glucose regulation, that sort of thing, like insulin, but we can't really see things like female hormones or male hormones. We can see thyroid and certain nutrients that are required for thyroid, but not necessarily sex hormones and those sort of adrenaline sort of things. But yeah. Yeah.
I have to say, I've started really enjoying scanning pregnant women because, for example, you can get some really great red flags there that if you can address it in pregnancy, it's really going to help the child. One of my clients who we got pregnant after a little while, her iodine was super low, and iodine is so important for babies' brain development. So we can pick that up, we can address that in pregnancy, and it would just prevent issues down the track. Also with Oligoscan, you can use it from age 2 and 70 centimeters and 10 kilograms. So it's great that you can use the testing from that young an age. And also, once again, iodine is so important. And I love it when I've got these kiddies that are coming in with all sorts of developmental issues and stuff. And you can then clearly see that their iodine is like so low on the chart.
Yeah.
And it's often quite an easy fix, or kiddies with attention issues. And you can see their zinc is very low. And so there's like dysregulation, or they're sick all the time. And there's so much that you can pick up on the scan. That's really
Definitely.
helpful.
Lithium's another one. Lithium and iodine, you see those two. They can also ADHD or just, hyperactivity. Zinc is a really big one for the young kids, for sure. Really big one. And also candida as well. So it's worth mentioning too that candida is not just a yeast overgrowth that you treat and everything is all fine after that. It's such a balancing act because candida is always going to be there, right? We're never going to get rid of it 100%. It's always going to be there, but it's also very opportunistic. So whenever there's an opportunity to thrive, it will go for it. And so you really need to watch that closely. Not just symptoms, but you can watch it on the scan, but you still need to keep treating it because someone can still have candida or have a yeast problem or a mold problem and it not necessarily show up. And so making sure you're putting in the probiotics and the right foods to keep it at bay is really important. But the other really interesting thing that I learned from all of this experimenting with candida was, again, before I understood all of this, I would treat people for candida and go, cool, nailed it, got it sorted. But all the heavy metals go up. I'm like, what's happened? I'm like, well, I don't understand. Again, researching, talking to professionals who know a lot about candida, I learned that candida acts like a binder. So it actually binds or hides or engulfs. I'm not 100% sure of what it's doing, but it's actually hiding those heavy metals. So with that, they were always there. But even on our scan, they were hidden from the scan. And I had this boy who was on the spectrum, I think it was 3. And when I scanned him, the candida was strong. Yeah, he had the symptoms for it as well. So I started treating that. And I actually used homeopathics for him because he couldn't swallow tablets. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? Oh, I know, I'll go homeopathic. And I've come to really appreciate homeopathics and what they can do because they are treating the whole body. And obviously things with like herbs or supplements are going through the digestive system. Sometimes you want to go a little bit out of the digestive system. So we used homeopathics with him and he started responding really quickly. And he was going really great. And he was nonverbal when I first started treating him. I was 3 or 4 and still not toilet trained. He wouldn't look at you, he wouldn't come near you. The second time I went out to see him, and he'd only been on the homeopathics for maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks, he literally jumped into my arms.
Oh.
And was climbing all over me. And he was talking in his own language. He was still hard to understand, but yeah, it was quite a massive change. When I scanned him again, his lead levels were through the roof in the red. And I went, okay. Because when I originally scanned him, I was expecting the heavy metals, right? I was like, yeah, spectrum would be high aluminium, or it would be high lead, or it would be high mercury. It'd be one of those three brain type heavy metals. And then I scanned him and I was like, okay, his heavy metals are not high. That doesn't make sense. Aluminium was on the line, but it wasn't off the charts that you would expect it to be. But after treating him for the candida, I was like, okay, now it's making sense that the reason he has these slow learning and slow development is this high lead. And so then we can start to chelate that and start to focus on that. So yeah, it's quite cool. It's a cool learning experience.
It is. Our clients are definitely our biggest teachers. And that is something to take into account when you do go for a scan with a practitioner, that your second scan the metals can sometimes be worse. Like especially if you've got very low zinc and iodine and selenium, and your metals, they will hide away. So the mercury will go and sit in the brain tissue. And then once you get the zinc levels up, it will get the mercury out of the brain and into the tissues. And that's why it's important when you're reading the scan to remember that it's telling you what's in the tissues. So that's why the second scan, the metals can often be higher, because it's telling you it's pulled it out of the brain and into the tissues, and then out of that, after that, out of the body. So don't be shocked if your second scan, your metals look worse. What we then want to see after that is that it starts coming down.
Yeah, exactly. The metals are probably already there, always there. They were just hiding from that first scan. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So Irene, for people who want to work with you and practitioners who maybe already have the Oligoscan but want to know how to better utilize it, tell us how clients can work with you and how practitioners can do your course.
Oh, thank you. I have, as you say, it's a 6-week course, but it's actually delivered over 7, because on the 7th one, we actually look at live not live, case studies. We review case studies. I've got a whole heap. Sometimes you had a really good one there. So it's really good to go through it and to share and to collaborate. My teaching is all around, my first 4 weeks is all about the Oligoscan. So we're looking at things like, because aluminium is just like everyone's got aluminium. It's everywhere in our environment. It's in baking powder. It's in anything that is anticoagulant. It's in our water. People are using coffee pods. The aluminium coffee pods, it's a crazy one. And it is such a disruptive one as well. So we spend a bit of time on that one. And then we look at things like mercury and cadmium, obviously leaky gut and the kind of things that they do. We look at bone health and all the things that we discussed today about all of those nutrients that to look for, and not to just look at one thing like calcium, but to put that whole picture together when trying to assess people's bone health and their dental health as well. Vitamin D, obviously a big one. Things like diabetes and insulin resistance, which is like what we were talking about with antimony and chromium and candida. So all those kind of really cool things. And then I spend the next couple of weeks looking at how to interpret the blood, the venous blood. So I use a book by Claire Pyers, which has all of the optimal health ranges for pretty much all the blood tests that you can do. So the beauty of that is the doctors are looking at a really wide range when they're looking at something. For example, they might be looking at vitamin D, and the range that they're looking at is something between, depends on the lab, but it's between 50 and 150, for example. So if you had your vitamin D tested and it was 52, the doctor would say, oh, yeah, everything is fine.
Mm.
Often don't tell the patient what their levels are. They just say, oh, yeah, it's all fine. But we look at what is an optimal for vitamin D. So vitamin D, optimal, we're looking at more like 100, 120 plus up to about, say, 200. That would be optimal. And that would allow a really strong immune system, really strong bones, and hormonals as well. I think that's another thing that is perhaps forgotten about, that vitamin D is quite vital for healthy hormones. So, yeah, we look at all of those sort of things and how vitamin D is actually synthesized in the body and why there might be problems with all of that. So I run it as a webinar type series. We all get together, we have a chat about things. I'll go through the presentation, and then we'll chat about any questions, Q&A at the end. So we do it every 2 weeks for 6 weeks of learning, and then the 7th we go through case studies. So it's been really great because I've got to know you and I've got to know people, because I'm in Adelaide and you're in WA, and I've met people from all over the country, and it's been amazing. I actually just in the last month have sent a device over to Germany, and I've started treating people in Germany. And I have a few practitioners in Germany who actually want to jump onto the next webinar series, which is really exciting. So, yeah.
You're expanding. It was great because each webinar session is like about an hour long, which I found just the right amount of time because I have such a busy clinic. And so I found that was actually really manageable. But the amount of information that you pack into that hour is really great. And then the information that you send through afterwards with the notes is really handy because I've been able to save that all. Your handouts are really good. And it's great to refer to as well. So
thank you. Yeah.
Really helpful.
Yeah. That's the idea. So that, because it is, like you say, it is a lot of information. It can get overwhelming, but when you have the notes, you can just do a quick Control F find, Candida. Oh, there. Okay. Yep. And you can quickly refresh your memory. Whereas if you're writing hand notes, because I'm a big hand note writer, or I used to be, trying to find where you wrote about that it can be very time consuming, and we're all about time efficacy, aren't we?
Yeah. And you've got a Facebook group as well, which is that's growing. And that's good to have that support there as well.
Yeah.
Now, can you just also tell our listeners where they can book with you and how they can find out about your courses? Just tell them about your website and what's the best in your socials and what's the best place for them to get hold of you.
Yeah. So my business name is Eat Right for Life. So my website is eatrightforlife.com.au. So probably at this point, I'm still putting together a website that is separate because obviously my website's more for my clientele who want to come and see me in clinic. So I'm still working on the website, which is for the practitioners. But you can certainly email me at irene@eatrightforlife.com.au, and I can talk to you more about that and send you through the course outline. I've got my next series is starting on the 4th of September. And so that will get us through to sort of November-ish, which just gets us in before Christmas and crazy times. That will be my last one for this year. And and that's run at 6:30 p.m. in Adelaide time. So I know sometimes it was a bit tricky for you, but it just works out best for most people.
Oh, it was fine for me as well because it was 5 p.m. It was just weird that you're an hour and a half ahead of us. I just don't understand who decided that's a good idea to do like half hours. But no, it was perfect timing for me. It was great.
But the good thing is too, like the actual learning material is all pre-recorded. So you can, if you do miss it or you want to go back and watch it afterwards, you can go back and watch it afterwards. But I always find that the discussions that we have before and after are really helpful. And it's all about collaboration. Like, I'm no expert. We're learning all the time. And what I've learned with autism as well, that sharing information with each other and looking at cases, and when you can look at them all together, you can see the trends, and we can work on these trends together, and it makes us all better clinicians at the end of the day. And that's what we want to be. So
100%. It's been fun hanging out with you again today. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And because it's a Wednesday episode, it's going to come out nice and early. So it'll be in time for the 4th of September. So hopefully some practitioners come and join you. And I hope more people jump on board with Oligoscan, because whenever I send clients to other parts of Australia, I'm always surprised how few Oligoscan practitioners there are. And I'm a bit of an evangelist at the moment because it's been so revolutionary in my practice. So I think everyone should incorporate it into their practice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for today, Irene. I'll chat with you again very soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye.